Hello, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the ZEDEDA Transform conference. This is our inaugural conference that we will be having every year. I would like to welcome our esteemed panelists that will be talking about remote orchestration in a COVID world today. My name's Lisa. I'll be your chaperone for the day. I will be online. You won't see me after I finish talking, but I will be here visible watching chat. If you need anything from me, please reach out. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Mark Williams from the Channel Company.
Great. Well, here. Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it. Well, hey, welcome, everybody. Appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. Let me do this. Let's do quick introductions. Let me introduce myself. I'll go through and ask each of the members of the panel to introduce themselves. And then we'll take a couple minutes. I do have a few slides from some research that we've done to kind of set the stage. And then we're going to make it basically a discussion after that. So again, my name is Mark Williams. I am a consultant with the Channel Company. If you aren't familiar with the Channel Company, you may know us from some of our key brands like CRN or Exchange. One of the things that we do is we do consulting relative to what's happening within the solution provider and systems integrator communities. We spent the last couple of years really focused on kind of how to monetize this whole situation, how to basically go to market in a combined world. So recently we completed this COVID study where we went and asked partners and solution providers what's happening and what they're seeing within the customer set, which I'll share in a minute. But first, let's do introductions. So Sam, why don't we start with you and have quick intros on who you are, your company, and a little bit about you.
Sure. Okay. My name's Sam Hoff. I'm president of a company called Patti Engineering. We're a control systems integration company, really concentrated in the OT world. We have offices in Auburn Hills, Michigan, Indianapolis, Indiana, and Austin, Texas. Some people ask where the name Patti comes from. Patti is my wife and also the CFO of the company. So she has all the money. If I'm ever bad, you'll never see me again. But, you know, we're definitely seeing with our clients the convergence of the OT and the IT space and how to move data around and all is becoming very, very important, and how the analytics play into manufacturing. With that, I'll pass the baton.
Great. Travis? Thanks, Sam.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad to be here. My name is Travis Cox. I'm the co-director of sales engineering for Inductive Automation. So we're a software provider. We provide Ignition, which is our HMI SCADA MES platform. And my team, we are responsible as the solution architects. So we help our customers and our partners with architecting systems, applying best practices, helping with implementations, proof of concepts, understanding technologies, whatever may be there. So again, happy to be here.
Great. Welcome. Matt?
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Yarger. I'm the head of mobility and automotive at the IOTA Foundation. We're an organization that is building a distributed ledger technology that is advancing beyond typical blockchain structures. We focus on data and value transfer mechanisms, zero fees, and scalable integration, so sending data in real time, which is very applicable for the IoT space. We focus on taking these capabilities and putting them into general embedded frameworks, so you can actually make useful blockchain-based products that increase your security and your flexibility of systems and allow for interoperability along with a number of other things. Prior to IOTA Foundation, I was a federal government employee as well, so based here in Austin, Texas, did 8 years at the National Security Agency in cybersecurity, and then a few years at the Department of Defense Cyber Crime Center doing digital forensics and blockchain research.
So we can't ask you a lot of questions about your previous experience.
Yeah, I'll answer, but it's not going to be very clear.
Well, welcome. Hey, to do a little housekeeping thing, do me a favor real quick, Sam. Do you mind going on mute really quick? I think we are getting a little reverb back. But with that, let me turn it over to Nati.
Hi, so my name is Nati Shalom. I'm the CTO and founder for Cloudify. Previously, I was the CTO and founder for Gigaspaces. I actually started my computer, if you like, science journey in 8th grade in the Weizmann Institute, where I kind of built my own computers and some other interesting gigs around that, and then continued to from electronics. That's where I kind of educated to software. So we were really pioneer in building highly distributed systems with my previous company, which was called Gigaspaces. We kind of built NoSQL data source and grid computing systems back in the days where, a lot of that ideas just came before the cloud world. And obviously, when cloud came in, we quickly realized that we need to build automation to manage that. All the manual processes is not going to work. And that's kind of how we spin off Cloudify, which was originally built to manage our own stuff, and now it's became an open source orchestration, primarily focused on handling multi-cloud orchestration and also orchestration of edge devices. So it's from the cloud into the edge, where we look at the edge as, if you like, a private case of multi-cloud.
Great. Well, thanks everybody. It sounds like a lot of experience in this panel here. So let me start off, like I said, with some of the research that we've done. So Jason asked me to kind of share what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Again, our organization works heavily with the channel, right? So think of systems integrators, solution providers. What we do is we go and talk to them about what they're seeing and what they're hearing within the customer community. This was a pretty extensive study that we did early summer, midsummer. Basically did research in terms of survey work, as well as really getting into some details around what they're seeing, not only today, but I think what was more important is what they're kind of seeing going forward over the next 3 to 6 months. Obviously, the code situation, depending on what city you're in, what state you're in, what country you're in, is very, very different. So we did try to get kind of a global perspective, and these are just some of the things that we heard. So obviously, being a consultant, we have to put everything in a framework. This is how we work. I see Matt shaking his head. So let me explain what we did. When we were talking to them, we were really asking them, where do you see opportunity? Where do you see revenue coming? Where do you see the impacts of the whole situation? And from that, we consolidated that down into a fairly simple approach in terms of what we saw. Obviously, if you look at the matrix that we put together, quick explanation, top part of this is more solutions, application-oriented kind of things. The bottom is more infrastructure. The left is more around kind of just systems and upgrade stuff, versus the right side, which is really more about employee-facing, customer-facing, things like that. Obviously, one of the biggest issues that we found is that depending on what industry you're in, obviously they're incredibly impacted. So some of the areas are oil and gas, hospitality, obviously this may or may not apply depending on individual companies. So we really did apply this to the companies that really are trying to move forward. Basically, the way we broke this out is there's really 4 main quadrants of where we heard partners telling us that customers were investing. Top right was around critical line of business, which I'll explain in a minute. There's investment there. People have to figure out how to reorganize how they work, things like that. On the bottom, there's a whole focus around, okay, now that when we move into the post-COVID world, there's going to be things that have now become critical that weren't critical before. In the reimagine category, in the bottom left, it's like, well, how are you doing business? Are you going to continue to have on-premise? Are you going to move to cloud? Are you going to look at edge technologies? It's really, what are you thinking about? And obviously on the top left is around, look, they got to continue to do business with what they're doing, maintaining what's going on. Obviously, what we found in that category is, look, investment is less because companies are going to be shifting their investments over to the right. So solution providers are trying to figure out how they do that. Just to bring it to life, let me give you some examples of that. In the reimagine category, obviously, companies had to immediately take and move employees home. Many companies never worked that way before, so they had to completely rethink how they work, what the processes look like, what their security looks like, everything. Then what's happened since then is that now they've had to harden those environments. So if we have a bunch of people working at home and remotely, now what do we do, right? Do they have the same kind of access that they had before? What about access to even simple things like documents and printing and all that kind of thing? So companies are now saying, look, I've got to invest in that. I can't just leave it up to chance. We also see in the US where you have a lot of issues around state and local government issues relative to unemployment and how all those systems work. Those are things that have been just chugging along for the last 30 years. All of a sudden now, because of the situation, they're broken. So now there has to be investment to fix those things. If you look at the top right, companies are having, there's a lot of investment around curbside pickup and delivery options and things like that. that has literally been escalated to a completely different degree. And companies didn't necessarily have budget set aside to invest there. So now what's happening is that now they have to go and address that. And then over on the bottom left, obviously you have MSP renewals and software licenses. On the left side, they're having to rethink what they're doing. What security used to look like is not what security is looking like going forward. Do they continue with all their on-prem stuff? We're hearing a lot around move to MSP models and moving out of CapEx models because cash is king now. It's like, okay, can I move this into more of an OpEx remote managed world? And then again, on the maintenance side of this, it was, well, what are you doing? Obviously, what we're seeing is that they're updating where they need to invest, but they're reevaluating where they don't necessarily have to invest so that they can invest elsewhere. So again, this is kind of some of the things that we heard just to sort of set the stage. So with that, let me turn it over to Nati. Nati, I have a question for you. So basically, obviously, COVID environments affected the way cloud is working and remotely managing that. What is Cloudify seeing as it relates to your solutions in the COVID world?
I think it's also correlating to what you just presented. What we're seeing is what I call the public cloud gold rush, which is many organizations are now realizing that the data center is limited, especially when you talk about remote access, and they have initiative to move to public cloud. If I look at the statistics, in light of COVID, 47%, that's according to Flexra survey, 47% of organizations are planning to increase their usage of cloud in light of the coronavirus. Yep. And 50% are expected to move to public cloud within 12 months. That's huge. At the same time, what we're seeing is that their cost in cloud is skyrocketing. The reason why is because the way they move to cloud is not with the right tools. They move with a lot of silos. So they have a team that is doing public cloud, a team that is doing Amazon, a team that is doing Azure, a team that is working on the private cloud. The private cloud has not been modernized for a while. So there's many silos within that journey that not just doesn't save money, it actually, multiplied their cost quite a bit. And again, according to that survey, 78% really are reporting that they're facing issue with transitioning from the private cloud, and it becomes a much longer journey than they originally planned. So they're thinking of doing it in a year or two, and now they realize that it's going to take probably more than that time, towards somewhere closer to 10 years, depending on how big you are.
So Travis, let me ask you a question about that. So obviously, as it relates to getting access to data and infrastructure remotely, what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing, I mean, certainly, in this COVID world here, we're seeing a lot of businesses who really, data is king, right? And getting visibility of that data is really important, especially now remotely, being able to work from home. And so when you look at the OT side of the fence, a lot of the systems that were there, maybe proprietary, or maybe had restrictions on who can get access, or it wasn't easy for IT to bring, to secure properly or to make public, and so there's been a lot of challenges, right? But being able to leverage edge computing, leveraging the cloud, can fill that gap, and can allow people to get access to more of that data, to stay connected, and it's really start leveraging technologies, right, that exist here today, that can really bridge the gap between that world and the IT world here.
Yep. Matt, how about you? I know you are doing a lot of this on the privacy side and things like that. What are you saying?
Yeah, I'm working on it in a few different areas. So we have a lot of global projects going on where they're trying to get data with more secure solutions and things of that nature. But we've seen a huge impact on the industry for finding ways to get more data and finding ways to share that data, because it's just can be such a difficult and expensive process. And the one thing that remote only and remote incentivized organizations, which we've all started to become in this instance, are really seeing is we have to find ways to do this remotely. We have to find ways to share data remotely. You can't always have people accessing your systems anymore, going in, checking out the data centers and getting into a closer instance of what's going on. So what's a way to scalably and reliably do this without giving someone remote access to a critical system? So there's a lot of different things that come to play with that. Cloud has made a huge difference over the last 10 years, of course, with enabling organizations to get access to the same data. But one of the things we've been doing is not just how do you get access to the same data, but how can other people get access to the root data? So with IoT, how do they get access to sensor data? How can they share that without having to give access to their cloud instances and give new permissions and access systems for these type of things? And there's just a huge learning curve around how new technologies like what we're bringing to the table can start to alleviate a lot of these concerns.
Okay. How about you, Sam? I know you're dealing in a little different world, but how is that affecting you and your customers?
So, there's a lot of more emphasis on collaboration tools. Dealing with a lot of people that are on the design side of automotive and all. They're having a lot of virtual meetings and all that stuff. But it's one of the managers told me a couple weeks ago is, how do I replace the 20 or 25 5-minute meetings a day that they have, where you go from one cube down to the other to talk about how a couple different parts fit together and all that stuff, and so much of it is the human element of how we collaborate and how we get people to work together more smartly without being at their office, without being on the plant floor. So I know that a lot of the large automotive companies, their non-critical engineers are not coming back until 2021 at the earliest. So
Great. How about some of the information? I know when we were talking earlier about some of the monitoring things that you're doing, how are you doing that in kind of this world where you can't physically go on site? What's happening there? How are you doing that?
Well, we're using cloud a lot. We had a lot of cloud-based projects in the works pre-COVID, and certainly emphasizing that more post-COVID. Also looking at different tools to be able to remotely troubleshoot. A lot of customers are all over condition monitoring these days, rather than having to bring service people in. How can we tell when the system is ready to fail? So I think in a lot of ways, COVID is kind of forcing a lot of Industry 4.0 initiatives to move forward and kind of accelerate at light speed.
Well, I suspect it's being forced to be more planned, right? Instead of someone just showing up, I'm here to fix something, there's a little more of a process behind it. So preventative stuff actually can make a big difference.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. What about, and I'll open this up to everybody, what are you seeing in terms of certain industries and how they're coping with this? Have you seen differences by industries? Anybody want to talk about that one?
So go ahead, Sam. I'll let you take it.
I'm sorry. I think food and bev really didn't have much of a chance to shut down at all. They had to keep running.
Yep. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, except for the local businesses, though. Food and bev local businesses and smaller like chains and small, medium-sized businesses have taken a massive hit from everything that's going on. I mean, I know here in Austin, if you don't make a majority of your income from food, they've been shut down since COVID started almost. Yep. So that's businesses that have been shut down for 4, 5, 6 months almost. And a lot of them have had to shut their doors. From a public sector situation, because I talk a lot with cities and regulators and things of that nature, cities have definitely been hit very hard as well. But the good thing is they have a lot of ways to adjust quickly. So, I mean, a lot of cities like here in Austin, they get a lot of the income from tolling systems and parking solutions and things of that nature. So even the city income from those type of things have been really impacted. And then going from a completely like in-person way of working to now adopting Microsoft Teams or Slack or what have you has been a really big learning curve for them. So it took 2 to 3 months, I think, for most of them to really start to get into a flow. Yeah. And then from industries, the automotive industry has been hit really hard. E-health is taking a huge jump. So we're seeing like a big rise in demand in like biotech companies and solutions in that nature, remote health solutions. So I'm a disabled combat veteran, so I go through the VA for my healthcare, and it's amazing. Responded because now I have Zoom calls with my healthcare providers, and it happens on a weekly basis. So organizations have really started to adapt to it. I think it's like made systems and processes more efficient. And it's actually allowed people to focus more on not like having the water cooler time, but what do we really need to do today and how do we continue to operationalize?
So you get more productive.
Mm-hmm.
You're focused. Let me ask you a question. So obviously you have a security background. So what about the security aspects of all this in terms of remote orchestration?
The good thing I see is it helps put a spotlight on security issues. Traditionally, security has been like a second or a third thing with a lot of organizations. They're like, okay, how do I build a solution? How does it, make a product? How can I build a business around it? And security has been something that they address as a later fact when it's already too late, when they've already been taken advantage of. But now through things like Zoom and everything, you're seeing the open source communities in security and security researchers really get a lot more attention on the things that they're putting out there. And you're seeing the organizations that are having these issues address them much more quickly. Like there were a lot of issues with Zoom, for instance, but they've come through and they've completely changed the way they operate in a very quick fashion. And they're really leaning heavily on security researchers all over the world to help accelerate that. So it's nice to see this start to come into the spotlight and really be a starting conversation and not a reactive conversation.
Nati, how about you? Is security impacting your organization?
I think that there are two aspects to that. One of them is we're starting to see call it the Zoom effect or the Netflix effect, where application, Zoom and Netflix was kind of a unicorn at the time to reach a global reach and serve, users regardless of their locations using CDN and some other aspects of technologies. Obviously, with the move to remote, a lot of application now needs to make it the norm. So a lot of application now needs to be able to run in this type of operation, but they don't have the skills, don't have the engineering, and that's kind of where a lot of the cloud new services helps around that. The fact that you have many distributed data centers already in place, but there is a lack of knowledge in how you build those type of things. The other thing that is, I think, becoming more apparent is the need for automation. So obviously, when you start to run at that scale,
Yep.
There's no way you could run things like you've done in the old world or in your existing data center, where you had a lot of manual processes. Everything had to be automated. And again, Zoom is a very good example because whenever you log into Zoom, you get good quality, good access, regardless of my location. This is amazing. And I think this application that we're discussing here right now, that wasn't that common before. Like even if when I started COVID, I was trying, Skype, or I was trying the Cisco one. I forgot the name of it.
WebEx.
Yeah, exactly. There was very different experience when I tried it from Israel, where I'm based, and someone in the US, and you got very different experience. And now they kind of even. And Zoom was kind of the only thing that worked at the time, at the beginning of COVID. And you could see that, it started to kind of ramp up very quickly.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole employee side of this. Let me switch gears.
By the way, speaking of Zoom, putting a camera on those type of meetings became also a change. It wasn't that common. People were just speaking on voice at the beginning on conferences, and now you could see culture really changing towards that people are opening camera because you need that interaction, at least at the face level.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. We're talking technology, but if you look at the situation relative to how people go to market, sales, marketing, you can't do it without this. Now the questions become, how do I keep it from being same old and boring? And there's a lot of work happening in that area. Let me switch gears a little bit, Travis. So one of the things we talked about earlier is around kind of how the edge plays a role in all of this, and how the edge plays a role in kind of how OT infrastructure is being architected now. Tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing there.
Yeah, that's kind of piggybacks off of security, right? When we go to now this world here, we have to get data remotely. Well, security is paramount across the entire stack, right? And we have legacy OT networks that ultimately there are a lot of insecure areas. And the way that we architect systems on that side, especially SCADA, wasn't really conducive to making that, let's say, available, publicly, or people working from remote. Or if we want to get data to the cloud and leverage that data in the cloud, how do we do that? New sensors coming in, okay, yeah, they can plug and play and do that, but we have a huge brownfield world, lots of legacy PLCs and protocols out there that we have to work with as well. So we're seeing a big shift in investing in infrastructure, basically solving a lot of the OT problems on that side, which is decoupling our applications from our devices, being able to have devices publish data into infrastructure in a secure, open architecture, open standard way that allows more broader access and allows for it, of course, securely. Be able to get that data to the cloud, to leverage that, or of course get that data to people. And the technologies that exist here today, so it's easy now to have applications that are completely web-based, that are secure, that use your corporate identity system, so they can have multi-factor authentication, single sign-on effects, so that we get data from the OT side of the fence up to in a proper infrastructure. Then it's easy to start leveraging that data, getting it to people who need it, as well as to be able to start leveraging things that in the cloud, like machine learning or analytics, high level things that people want to get to. So it's really that kind of shift. Infrastructure, I think, is probably one of the biggest things people customers are really going through right now, and that really edge computing plays a huge role, especially from the brownfield world.
So who in the organizations is focused on that? I mean, obviously you're coming out of this from two different worlds, right? Who is actually taking charge and saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it?
Yeah, so a lot of these projects, right? If you will, a lot of digital transformation projects are started from the IT side, right? That's largely where capital is. The projects, they can see the business value for doing those, but they can't do it alone, right? They can't just draw a line down the plant floor and say we're going to get access to all that data. So it really takes. I was just in a panel before about OT-IT convergence, and it really takes the OT managers on that side and the IT managers to really come together and have a joint effort to be, so that it's. They both see it as a critical need for the company to move forward, so that they can put the right infrastructures and put proper security measures in place on both sides. So it's the ones that are doing it successfully, the ones where they are all working together.
Yeah, it's funny. In some of the people we run an IoT advisory board, and it talks exactly about this convergence. And I think one of the common themes that come out of this is the technology exists, the capabilities exist. The issues are, can you do proof of concept, but not proof of concept, but proof of value. We know it works, but it isn't worth anything. The other part was the people side of this. Like, okay, can you get along well enough to share information so that you can drive change, as opposed to fiefdoms and silos that exist and they're controlled.
And real quick, to be clear too, when we see the shift in infrastructure, it's not or architecture, it's not like they're ripping and replacing everything they had. That's not going to work, right? It has to be able to put things in parallel. That's going to provide that business value to get them through those POVs, because that's what drives these things, right? If they don't get that value, they're not going to go any further with it at the end of the day. So
Nati, how about you? I know you play in this world quite a bit. What are you saying?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. One of them is one driver that we're seeing is that the move to what I call reactive systems, in which we used to ship devices like even car or this phone or whatever, and we're shipping it out of factory and it was disconnected and it was kind of living in its own world. And once you shipped it, you're disconnected from it. To a world in which we need to have that closed loop, and that device is now becoming part of a data center application. It's not siloed anymore. If you have a car, especially if you're in Tesla, it's part of it's always connected to some sort of a data center. If you're delivering, set-top box, like the streaming media and whatever, that set-top box needs to be continuously updated, even your Wi-Fi at home, instead of sending a technician to fix things when things doesn't work. So what we're seeing, and that's why I call it a private case of multi-cloud, what we're seeing is that a lot of the devices become an extension on cloud, and the way we want to manage them, we want to operate them, is very similar to the way we're treating cloud. Like it's like a VM in a cloud, just it happens to be remote, and someone needs to take care of all the issues that are associated with that. Like you mentioned, I think Travis mentioned the security aspects, the connectivity aspect, the latency aspect, a lot of nuances. But other than that, we want all that to be hidden and kind of treat all the devices as if it was just another computer in the cloud, and kind of let someone take care of that. And that's kind of where we play in that game.
Right.
There are some leading edge manufacturers that are employing CI/CD technologies, even for like their PLCs. And CI/CD is continuous improvement, continuous deployment. It's kind of like your Tesla, right? You walk out one morning, you got new features on your screen because you got the magic update. And how can you do that with your control systems, right? Because invariably what happens with your control systems is they're put in and they're never touched until you got a add a new thing or do a new function with that machine or that assembly line or whatever. So
I think you brought a good point about CI/CD, and the challenge that I think as an industry we have is how do we make that Tesla experience everywhere? And for that, you need some sort of a more generic way to deal with that, and not something that everyone needs to build his own stack to deliver.
Yes. Yep.
Matt, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. So the CI/CD thing is a huge shift of a lot of different industries. I mean, when I was with the government, we would have systems that were from the 70s. And I was in the 2000s. So we would do major shifts and upgrade entire server rooms to, like 1 or 2 Dell blades or something like that. And it just completely changed the way that the systems operated. But we're seeing that everywhere now, like the ability to remotely update applications and software. But the biggest thing is with these critical infrastructures and, SCADA systems and stuff like that, how do you do that in a more security-centric manner? And traditionally, everyone's like, oh, we know we need to get there at some point. But now they're like, oh, well, now we have to get there now. And it's really putting the spotlight on that. So I'm excited to see it.
So I know you talked a little about sort of the digital identity and things that you're working on. How does that fit into all this?
So that's a really interesting overlap with what we're talking about, because it's really about the system of systems perspective and this data ownership perspective. So I work for a company that's a nonprofit that's based in Berlin, and that requires everything we build to be GDPR compliant. But I'm based in Austin, Texas, and we don't have that kind of regulation here. So when it comes to local systems, the conversations are really interesting to see, because people are like, oh, well, what do we do with the data? How do we hold it? And how do we secure it? And blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, let's take a different perspective and look where Europe is with GDPR and how they're now defining system design to where the individual owns the data or the organization owns the data. And then how do they share that? How do they retain ownership of that? And then how can they ensure compliance and things of that nature with it? So distributed and decentralized technologies are making massive amounts of progress over the last 3 years in this area through organizations like W3C, the Linux Foundation, Industrial Internet Consortium, Object Management Group. There's a lot of big organizations that have been pushing the new standards around how identities can come into things or organizations or individuals. So organizations and individuals can verify who they are remotely, because I can't walk up to you and show you my driver's license on a Zoom call if I don't have a camera or what have you, and it shouldn't necessarily work like that. So there's a new demand for digitizing these processes and creating a mechanism for you to actually verify who somebody is, verify claims they make about themselves, whether that be credentials or anything like that, and verify like the ownership of data and solutions and things of that nature. So we've been very, very active in those spaces.
Kind of a combined single sign-on with the driver's license component where it can be shared across systems. So do you have access to actually make these changes in systems that Sam's working on and actually knowing all that? That makes sense.
Yeah, there's some countries that are doing that in small scales really well. Like if you look at Estonia, they are really, really well positioned for digital identities and remote verifications and things of that nature. They're a younger country, but they're also a smaller country, so they have an ability to have a lot of agility in that space. But you're seeing the larger companies like Germany and the UK and the US and everything starting to really try to understand it and the need to get there, but it's a much slower moving process.
Is it just a regulatory issue, or is it more of being able to really understand and have, like, if I'm online or you're giving access to certain things, there's a way to simplify that so that they know, who they are?
I think it's a three-pronged problem where regulatory situations aren't there yet. So there's massive policy changes need to happen. I mean, one of the things that's really prevalent throughout Europe is data labs or policy labs where they have regulatory sandboxes where they test new technologies, learn about them quickly, and then they can build new policies to enable them and accelerate them. We don't really have those here in the US, at least not in the same form that they do in Europe. The other is the educational aspect. When you have a bunch of mayors and governors and you're trying to explain how digital technologies work, sometimes there's a little bit of a gap there. So you really have to work on that educational process. And then the other is just the risk, like changing the entire way your system operates for in the US side, impact 350 million people. There's a lot of risk if you make the wrong decision in that. So a lot of these are new technologies. They don't want to take that risk essentially until they know without a grain of doubt that it's something they should move forward with.
Right. All right. We have a couple more minutes. Maybe I'll just ask each of you if you want to close out and share anything else. Just kind of go around. So maybe Travis, I don't know if you want to wrap up with anything else to share.
Yeah, no, sure. I think it just wasn't saying, like, we certainly see from a post-COVID world that there's a real kind of shift in focus in getting back to these digital transformation strategies to really making it happen, both from an orchestration standpoint, from a management standpoint, security, of course, as well as visibility of getting access to more of that data. And so I think really it's a lot around leveraging open platforms, open architectures, and following standards, right? And it's not about one single product here. It's about being able to leverage best in class, have a hybrid solution between on-premise and cloud, and have it all work together, naturally, not like it's a hacked, kind of thing. So that, it's as companies are progressing forward on both sides of the fences, OT and IT, that it's they know exactly where they want to go and what they're going to be doing. So I think that's probably one of the most important things is that focus.
Okay. Matt, anything else you want to close with?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what Travis is saying there. There's big shifts in that and how that changes the way organizations are working and how these different technology sectors are interacting with each other. I mean, we're seeing from the OT and IT side just massively enhanced collaboration. And the biggest thing is organizations had time before to develop these new solutions. Now they have to use what's out there. They have to use existing standards. They're not making their own competing standards anymore, making their own competing products. They're saying who's leading in this industry and how can we just start to work with them to get this done quickly.
All right. Nati, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I think I mentioned that one of the challenges in moving to public cloud and to edge is the silos. And the fact that the organization are having automation in place, but they're all done in silos. So we believe that the solution to that would be not to find one automation that will cover them all or to win them all, but actually thinking beyond that towards something that we call orchestrator of orchestrator, meaning a way to integrate all those automation into one end-to-end automation. And another concept that we found to be useful in that context is what we call environment as a service, really the ability to templatize an end-to-end environment in order that you'll be able to create that environment and then shut it down or decommission it completely and not keep things running just because you don't know how to rerun it to save costs, which is very common in this world, and it's associated with the silo experience that I mentioned. Now, the last thing that I wanted to mention is that we all need to think of a harmonization of the edge and cloud practices from an operational perspective. The way we treat edge and the way we treat another computer in the cloud needs to be consistent and almost the same, so that the developer experience would be a little.
Makes sense. All right, Sam.
To close out, I'm going to tell a story. So we all remember, like, maybe it was like early April, you're like stuck in the house 3 weeks, haven't seen anybody, haven't been out to dinner, just making emergency grocery store runs, watching the daily press conferences with Trump. So Peter Navarro was on the stage one day, and a tear just about came to my eye because he said, the key to the post-COVID and coming back is smart manufacturing. And I'm like, man, somebody gets it. And it was so true. And it is so true. So, and we, the people here, are the ones that are going to make it happen. So.
Right. Well, hey, guys, thanks, everybody. Let me turn it back over to Lisa to close out for us. Hey, Lisa.
Well, first, I'd like to thank everyone on our panel. Great session. Those of you that are in the audience that may have missed other sessions, just so you know, in the next week or so, we'll have all the content and video recordings up on our website. You will receive an email with links to that as soon as we're done doing all the editing and all that fun stuff on the backside. But thank you again, everyone, for joining the session. And once again, thank you to our panel for an amazing discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Great.
everybody.
All right, take care.
Okay, bye.